The seabed holds more history than any museum in the world. Beneath the waters of the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and the oceans that connected the colonial empires lie thousands of sunken ships that together represent incalculable wealth. Gold and silver coins, jewels, porcelain, bronze sculptures, and artifacts from civilizations that have been gone for centuries. Underwater archaeologists estimate that there are between 2 and 3 million unexplored shipwrecks on the world's seabed, many of them laden with treasures that in modern terms could be worth billions of dollars. And every year, divers and underwater robots make new discoveries that rewrite history and spark passionate debates about who is the rightful owner of those treasures that the sea has kept for centuries. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. The Mediterranean Sea is, without a doubt, the most studied body of water and the richest in underwater history on the planet. For more than 3,000 years, the Mediterranean was the most important commercial and military highway in the known world. Its waters were sailed by the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Carthaginians, the Romans, the Arabs, the Venetians, the Genoese, and the Spanish, transporting goods, armies, ideas, and riches. Sudden storms, naval battles, navigational errors, and accidental shipwrecks left behind an accumulation of ships and cargoes at the bottom of the sea, which today constitutes the most extraordinary archaeological archive in human history. Underwater archaeologists working in the Mediterranean have found ships from all eras and all cultures. Greek merchant ships from the 5th century BC loaded with amphorae of wine and olive oil, Roman galleys with their cargo of marble and bronze, medieval Arab ships with spices and fabrics, and Spanish galleons loaded with silver from America. Each of these ships is a time capsule that preserves, in the cold and darkness of the seabed, objects that on land would have deteriorated centuries ago. The salt in the water, the lack of oxygen, and the absence of light create preservation conditions that in many cases are superior to those of any land-based storage facility. One of the most extraordinary discoveries in the Mediterranean in recent times was made by the team of oceanographer Robert Ballard, the same one who discovered the Titanic in 1985 off the coast of Sicily in 2010. Their underwater robot detected the remains of 2 Roman ships from the 1st century BC at a depth of approximately 500 meters, with their cargoes of amphorae virtually intact. The underwater robotics technology that made this discovery possible, equipped with high-definition cameras and manipulator arms controlled from the surface, has opened a new era in underwater archaeology, allowing the exploration of depths that were previously completely inaccessible to human divers. If there is a shipwreck that concentrates the greatest amount of known wealth at the bottom of the sea, it is that of the San Jose galleon, sunk on June 8, 1708 in the Caribbean Sea off the coast of Cartagena de Indias in present-day Colombia. The San Jose was the flagship of the Spanish Tierra Firma fleet, and at the time of its sinking it was carrying one of the most valuable cargoes that ever sailed, approximately 11 million pesos in gold, silver, precious stones, and emeralds from the New World, intended to finance the wars of King Philip V of Spain. At current values, the contents of the San Jose are estimated to be between $4 and $17 billion, depending on the calculation methodology, which almost certainly makes it the largest known submerged treasure in history. The San Jose was sunk by a British naval squadron commanded by Commodore Charles Wager at the Battle of Baru. The ship exploded after being hit in its powder magazine, the hold where the gunpowder was stored, and sank in minutes, taking most of its nearly 600 crew with it. Only 11 people survived. The English, who had attacked precisely to capture the treasure, were unable to recover it because the ship sank too quickly and in waters that were too deep. For almost 3 centuries, the San Jose lay at the bottom of the Caribbean, somewhere unknown off the coast of Cartagena. The exact whereabouts of the San Jose was one of the great mysteries of underwater archaeology for decades. In 1981, the American company Sea Search Armada claimed to have located the remains of the ship and claimed rights to the treasure. In December 2015, Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos announced that the Colombian Navy had definitively located the shipwreck at a depth of approximately 600 meters, using high-resolution sonar technology and an unmanned underwater vehicle. The published images showed the galleon's cannons, anchors, and thousands of ceramic vessels scattered on the seabed. However, the Colombian government did not reveal the exact location of the shipwreck to protect it from treasure hunters. Since then, the San Jose has been declared a submerged cultural heritage of Colombia, and the debate over whether it should be excavated and to whom the treasure would belong remains one of the most complex in international maritime law. While the San Jose case is the largest in terms of potential wealth, the Mercedes frigate case is the most important in terms of its legal and diplomatic consequences, and is one of the most fascinating in the recent history of submarine rescue. The Mercedes was a Spanish war frigate sunk on October 5, 1804 at Cape Santa Maria, off the southern coast of Portugal, in a naval confrontation with a British squadron that attacked without a prior declaration of war. At the time of the attack, the frigate was carrying a cargo of gold and silver coins from Spain's American colonies, as well as civilian passengers who had boarded in Montevideo. In 2007, the treasure hunting company Odyssey Marine Exploration, based in Tampa, Florida, announced that it had recovered from the bottom of the Atlantic a shipment of approximately 500,000 gold and silver coins, weighing a total of about 17 tons. Odyssey codenamed the find Black Swan and secretly moved the cargo to Tampa. The value of the shipment was estimated at about $500 million. However, when it became known that the cargo came from the remains of the frigate Mercedes, the Spanish government claimed ownership of the treasure, arguing that the Mercedes was a Spanish warship sunk in combat and that warships are the sovereign property of the state that built them. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. The ensuing legal battle was one of the most closely followed in the history of international maritime law. Spain sued Odyssey in U.S. courts, arguing that the treasure was Spanish property under the principle of sovereign immunity of warships. Odyssey argued that the cargo had been placed on the ship by private traders. After several years of litigation, the American justice system ruled in favor of Spain in 2012. Odyssey was forced to return the 500,000 coins, which in February 2012 were transferred to Madrid and deposited in the National Archaeological Museum of Spain. The Mercedes case established a fundamental legal precedent. Sunken warships are the permanent sovereign property of the state that built them, and no salvage company can claim their cargo. Portugal, which was the first European naval power of the modern era, has one of the most extraordinary underwater archaeological heritages in the world in its coastal waters. The Portuguese coasts, especially Cape St. Vincent and the Tagus estuary, were for centuries the starting and ending point for the fleets that connected Portugal with its vast colonial territories, and many of those ships never reached their destination, sunk by Atlantic storms, naval battles, or navigational accidents. Portuguese archaeologists estimate that the remains of approximately 250 historic ships lie in Portugal's territorial waters, many of them from the Age of Discoveries, between the 15th and 18th centuries. The most famous of the Portuguese shipwrecks is probably that of the Nossa Senhora dos Martires, a galleon that was part of the fleet that brought Vasco da Gama back from his second voyage to India in 1503, and which sank in the Tagus estuary, opposite Lisbon in that same year. The ship's remains were located in 1993. Among the recovered objects were cannons, Portuguese and Indian coins, ceramics from various origins, and personal belongings of the crew, which painted an extraordinarily detailed picture of life aboard a Portuguese ship in the early 16th century. Another notable find in Portuguese waters was that of the San Julian galleon, sunk in 1578 off the coast of the Algarve during the unfortunate campaign of King Sebastian I of Portugal in North Africa. Underwater archaeology in the Algarve has uncovered dozens of anchors, cannons, and pottery fragments in recent years, confirming that these coasts were the scene of numerous shipwrecks of vessels carrying not only goods, but also the fate of an empire. For most of the 20th century, underwater archaeology was limited by the depth at which human divers can safely work, which rarely exceeds 40 or 50 meters. This meant that the vast majority of historical shipwrecks were completely inaccessible. All that changed with the development of unmanned underwater vehicles, ROVs, which can reach any depth in the ocean and are equipped with high-resolution cameras, side-scan sonar, and manipulator arms capable of picking up objects with great precision. LiDAR technology adapted for underwater use and state-of-the-art multi-beam sonar now make it possible to create three-dimensional maps of the seabed with a resolution of a few centimeters, making it possible to locate shipwrecks that were previously completely invisible. The combination of these technologies with big data and artificial intelligence is dramatically accelerating the pace of discoveries. Image recognition algorithms can analyze thousands of hours of underwater video to automatically identify shapes that could correspond to archaeological artifacts. However, technology has also brought new problems. The same tools that allow archaeologists to find and study historic shipwrecks also allow unauthorized treasure hunters to locate and loot them. The looting of underwater archaeological sites is a growing problem that irreversibly destroys the historical context of the findings. When an object is removed without rigorous archaeological documentation, a huge amount of historical information is lost that can never be recovered. The UNESCO Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage, adopted in 2001, establishes that underwater archaeological sites must be protected on site, provided it is possible. The question of ownership of underwater treasures is one of the most complex in international law. The answer is not simple and depends on multiple factors: the type of ship, its nationality, the depth at which it is located, the laws of the country in whose waters it rests, and the applicable international treaties. The case of the Mercedes frigate clearly established that warships have a special status of sovereign immunity. But most historical shipwrecks are not warships but merchant ships, and in that case the legal situation is much more complex. The 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea grants sovereignty to states over archaeological objects in their waters. While countries like Spain actively claim all their naval heritage, others cooperate with private companies in exchange for a percentage of the finds. Archaeologists generally oppose commercial salvage, arguing that prioritizing economic gain harms the scientific and historical value of the sites. Archaeologists, jurists, and governments agree that the treasures of the sea are a common historical heritage of humanity. They are not merely valuable objects, but material testimonies of civilizations and events. The gold of the San Jose, for example, represents the history of the Spanish Empire and the wars of the 18th century. The seabed is the world's largest historical archive, and its rigorous study and protection are a responsibility to future generations. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. Until next time.